Hello, welcome back to The Outspoken Artist. It is great to be with you all again. I'm your host, Giancarlo, and today we have an incredible guest joining us. He is an internationally renowned underwater portrait photographer, cinematographer, passionate educator, and all-around great guy. Hailing from Long Beach, California, and just about to embark on a journey to Europe to share his expertise, Brett Stanley has been mastering the art of underwater portrait photography for over 10 years. His innovative series, such as the viral underwater pole dance, and his work with circus performers have been featured around the world in major publications like Cosmopolitan and ABC News. Brett was also one of the creative forces behind the breathtaking project The Diver and the Mermaid, showcasing his unparalleled talent in underwater photography. What set Brett apart is not only the intricate set designs that he undertakes, but his unique ability to make people comfortable underwater even if they have no prior experience, resulting in captivating and stunning portraits. Please help me give a warm welcome to Brett Stanley. Brett, thank you for coming to the show. How are you today?
Good, man. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. All right, let's start off strong, man. I just saw it today. For those watching in the future, is the 30th of July, 2024. You just watched the Deadpool Wolverine movie, man. What do you think?
Yeah. It was amazing. Oh my God. I'm still on a high from it. It was, I haven't laughed that much in a long time. It was kind of incredible how funny that was.
We'll keep it all spoiler free. Was your theater crowded? Was it a bunch of people there reacting to the movie as well?
It wasn't super crowded. We went to like the 10 o'clock showing this morning, so it was pretty geriatric. But the two guys next to me were laughing as hard as I was, which is good because I can get embarrassingly loud sometimes in these things. So
yeah,
yeah.
I can say the same, man. I just I feel that movie, in a way, thankfully has made up for some of the other not so great Marvel movies out there. And those two guys, man, they just play off each other so well.
It's incredible. Yeah, I'm kind of marveled out. Like I kind of got to maybe like Endgame, and then I was like, oh, I can't do any more, and I was just over the whole thing. But I've always been a solid Deadpool guy, so it's like this I think actually is holding Marvel up right now. I think this is exactly what they needed, and yeah, hopefully they can, on the back of this, get some better movies out of it.
I hope so too, man. I hope so too. Well, let me go ahead and ask you some questions, man, because I got to know you a couple of years ago. I went ahead and started Googling underwater photography. I think most underwater photographers tend to do that. And they're like, all right, who's the who, right? Yeah. And you came across, and I saw it was The Diver and the Mermaid. And that was fascinating, man. That was astonishing when I saw that. And I'll have some questions about that later. But you originally started in Australia. You spent about, what was it, like 16 years in Australia, and then moved to New Zealand and eventually made it to the US. Can you tell me a bit about how growing up in Australia, then going to New Zealand, and now being in California has essentially shaped your art?
Yeah, so a little correction on that story. So I was born in Australia. I lived in Australia until I was about in my mid-20s.
Okay.
And then I moved to New Zealand, and I spent 10 years in New Zealand, met my wife there, fell in love with the country, fell in love with a girl, and then we moved to California about 11 years ago. So in terms of how that kind of influenced my work, it's a weird little thing. So I kind of grew up scuba diving. I was always in the water. I was always, a water baby. I was fascinated by it. But never in my wildest dreams did I ever think I was going to be an underwater photographer. It wasn't anything that was even remotely on my radar. And then when I was living in New Zealand, I moved from being a computer programmer, so a website programmer, to doing photography full time. And that meant, shooting weddings, doing children's photos, doing commercial shoots, doing advertising, all sorts of stuff. Anything I could get my hands on was what I was, kind of doing photographically. And it wasn't until we moved to the States in 2013 that I was starting to get a little kind of like, I don't think I'm great at this stuff, and I'm struggling with everyone else for all the work. Maybe I should look at something else that's a little different. and just see if it works. And I had gone through an old storage locker and I found one of my old dive cameras. And I was like, I wonder if I can, let me see if I can do what I do in the studio for the commercial work. Maybe I can do this underwater. And so I played with this camera and I was like, oh, yeah, okay, I can kind of see how this can go somewhere. And this was exactly the same time that we moved to California. And moving to California for me was a bittersweet thing because growing up, I always thought of California as a surf capital. I always thought the water was going to be warm and crystal clear and beautiful. And then I move here and the water is cold. It's kind of dirty. It was not a great place to start doing underwater photography. Um, so I ended up getting into swimming pools. So moving from country to country, it kind of opened up a whole new market for me because it was just about the same time as when my work took off and people started to notice my underwater work. That's when I started to that's when I started living in the States and suddenly I had access to, 300 million people instead of 4 in New Zealand.
Right. No, that's great. That's great. And what would you say is your connection now with underwater photography?
My connection with underwater photography is, well, I mean, it's everything. It's my entire personality. It didn't really dawn on me until later that most of my personality and the way I approach life in general is a lot like water. I'm fairly fluid. I'm fairly patient. I tend to not like, confrontation and stuff. So I tend to go with the flow. And so being an underwater photographer, now that I've been doing it for 10 years, I realize that it is the one place in the world that I am most relaxed and most calm and the most creative. So underwater photography for me is not so much a job or a career. It's kind of a necessity. I have to do this because that's where I rejuvenate. That's where I get my energy from, is from being under the water and creating stuff.
Now, being rejuvenated, being underwater, I totally get that, man. I started diving a couple of years back, and the serenity of being underwater is completely understated. As long as you can, you like it, right? If you don't like being
exactly.
underwater, it can be the most panicked, chaotic situation. But
Yeah.
To your point, you mentioned that you were a diver. Do you have any memorable moments, whether it was in Australia, New Zealand, that, I don't know, that just might have inspired some of your underwater work that perhaps you've done recently or in the past?
Yeah, I mean, so I started diving as soon as I was allowed to. So, which I think was 15 or 16, and this is, 30 something years ago. And so I'd been diving all of my life, but I had a big gap of not diving for maybe about 10 years in the middle there. Because I moved away from it and I didn't have friends who were doing it, so it was, it wasn't a thing that was on my radar. But I ended up getting a couple of my girlfriends over the years. They ended up getting into diving and stuff. And I think a lot of what it was for me in terms of, pulling inspiration and stuff from diving is just, I'm not so much inspired by wildlife. I don't really shoot wildlife unless it's big stuff like whales and things like that. The fish and things like that, they don't really interest me. But the landscape under the water for me is it's mystical, it's magical, it's and you couple that perhaps with some like really low visibility, and suddenly you've got this misty landscape that is, it's just a fantasy world. And so for me, I think a lot of the diving stuff, has given me I don't know, like the creation of backstories for, why is this shipwreck here? How can we use this and tell a story with it? And how can we take the amazing kelp that's out here off California and, and sort of make some, I don't know, some concepts and stuff that I hadn't really thought of being on the land. It wasn't until I was underwater that I started to see these places, and that's what sort of sparked my inspiration, I think.
That's wonderful. I've known you traveled, and I'll touch base on that in a bit. Are you still diving, or are you too busy making underwater portraits? Are you still an active diver, man? Seeing some wonderful sights down
So
under.
it's been a long time since I've been a recreational diver. Because I do work so much and I do travel so much. Um, I can't remember the last time I actually went on a recreational dive where it wasn't for a particular thing. Um, and I feel weird under the water without my camera and stuff. It's
Interesting how
I'm missing
that
something.
changes, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But it's interesting you talk about, maybe people don't like being under the water. And for me, um, the underwater world is a place of joy and serenity and beauty, but it's also fear. I get panic attacks. I am highly claustrophobic, and I have learnt, and I don't know if I got into underwater photography because of this, but I learnt that if I have a camera in my hand, I can distract myself from any of the panicky thoughts or anything like that. So a lot of it for me is if I dive without a camera, I kind of don't have my safety blanket with me. So
It's like a
it's
it's like a dual-edged sword there. So how do you prepare
yeah.
yourself mentally or physically when you're having to do a shoot, especially with these challenges?
Yeah, so I mean a lot of it for me is um I realized a long time ago I couldn't have any stimulants. I can't have I think I'm allergic to caffeine. So I definitely can't have any caffeine. I can't have anything, any sugar or anything before I go and sort of do a dive like that. Because it amps me up, and then that's when my brain turns on, and that's when all the badness starts. But a lot of it is just, and this is what I teach my models and stuff as well, is just the more relaxed you are and the more you're distracted when you're underwater, the less you're thinking about not dying and the less you kind of worry about stuff. Um, and I think that's why I end up doing a lot of these interesting, kind of crazy photo shoots under the water because it gives me a really good reason to distract myself while I'm down there. The worst thing for me is to not have a purpose. If I'm purposeless, then my brain starts to churn, and then that's when the fear and that sort of stuff kicks in. Um, so for me, I really love doing these crazy shoots like the diver and the mermaid, and the stuff that I do with Hannah Fraser, um, because it is like a little, it's pushing me out of my comfort zone, but it's also giving me things to feel comfortable about while I'm in there.
No, that makes sense. That makes sense. Um, what part of shooting underwater would you say you find most challenging and at the same time rewarding?
Working with new people, 100%. So I run an underwater portrait studio basically. So a lot of my work and sort of maybe 75% of the imagery that I produce is from just regular people coming to my studio or coming to me when I'm in a location and wanting an awesome photo of themselves underwater.
Right.
Whether that's maternity or like an engagement photo, or if they just want something for themselves, or any of the myriad things that I do. The biggest thing about it is some people want the photo and they haven't really thought about what the process is in terms of how we're going to get this photo. And so I have people coming to me who are very confident, very prepared for the underwater stuff. And I get people coming who might have a fear of water. I get people who might not even know how to swim, but they love the end result so much that they want to push themselves through that kind of process. And the biggest thing for me is taking someone who, even if they're like really comfortable and confident in the water, they might not know how to pose underwater. They might not know how to just relax. They might be a great lap swimmer, but if they can't just stop and chill and just kind of turn off, then they're not going to get the sort of photos that I produce. And so for me, the greatest joy is taking someone who might not be comfortable or might not be very good at it and sort of training them, teaching them and guiding them through this process so that at the end we can end up with these amazing results of them looking like they're a trained model when half an hour ago they couldn't even put their face under the water.
Yeah, I mean, you bring someone who just literally got their feet wet into this whole realm of underwater photography. For those people that have never posed underwater, like what are some of the, how do you help them overcome some of those initial apprehensions and just, I guess, make them feel comfortable, because that's the end goal, right? Making them feel comfortable so they're not, because you'll show the tension underwater whether you like it or not. So how do you get them comfortable?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is, I think it's my personality. I'm a fairly chill kind of guy. And I think I have a bit of a skill in terms of calming people down. And that's really my main goal, is to, whether we're shooting in the ocean or whether we're shooting in a spring or whether it's a swimming pool, it's me creating a comfortable, safe space for them and making them feel supported and guided, I guess. And this is what I teach in my workshops and stuff as well, is when I'm teaching other photographers, is the way I get the images that I get is, sure, I know how to use a camera, I know how to light, but the most of it is knowing how to teach someone and guide someone into a safe space. And my main technique for that is to get them to feel so relaxed that they're almost about to fall asleep. Because under the water, moving fast and trying to control the water itself ends up looking terrible. The more you can just relax and just react to what the water does, the better it's going to look. And so what I'm teaching them basically is, breathing exercises so that they can hold their breath for longer, but also buoyancy control, because what holds us up in the water is the air that's in our lungs.
Right.
So most of the time I'm getting them to breathe all that air out so that they can sink, which is, it's that fine line of, I want to sink, but I want to live. So how do I kind of keep these two things together? So I teach them basically, what happens to your body when you breathe air? How can you breathe? How can you hold your breath safely without having air in your lungs and all that sort of stuff? So I kind of go through the backstory of how your body works so they understand what they're doing is not dangerous, that their body can do this. And I just kind of give them all the tools and information they need to be able to do this and to pull it off.
No, that's great. That's great. All that information is fantastic to have. I suppose a common question you may actually get is, how do you hold your breath for so long underwater? Are you channeling that thought process elsewhere, or how are you doing that?
Yeah, honestly. So I think everyone has a different approach to this, but so my breath hold is about 2.5 minutes. So I can do about a 2.5 minute breath hold. But I cannot do that if I'm trying to hold my breath. So if I've got my watch out and I'm lying on the bottom of the pool, I can't do anywhere near that, because my brain has kicked in, it's watching every second and it's freaking out the whole time. So for me, my longest breath holds are usually when I'm holding the camera. And so, because I shoot a lot of video work as well underwater, so, music videos, feature films and stuff, a lot of them are me doing a take under the water and pushing the camera around. And I will just be so engrossed in what's happening in the performance that I'll forget how long I've been there for. And by the time my body says, you need to breathe and come back up, it'll have been like 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes. And so for me, it's really just getting lost. I can't hold my breath with any concept of time. If I know how long I've been there for, it won't kind of work. So it's really a method of distraction and trying to trick myself into doing it, I think.
No, that's great. Got to do what works, right? I guess now the diver in me wants to know. So what normally is your benchmark to figure out, okay, I'm going to bring oxygen underwater or I'm going to hold my breath? How do you determine, why not always use oxygen, I guess, is the best way to rephrase that question.
Yeah, totally. And it's a great question. And it's something that I see a lot in the underwater portrait world. I see a lot of people coming in from the dive world. Maybe they've been scuba diving their whole life and they're like, so, they suddenly want to try this. And what I see is them, putting their rig on, putting the regulator in, and then sort of having a bit of a conversation with the model, and then they go down, sit on the bottom, and just stay there and snap photos until they run out of air. The reason that I don't do that is because after every time that model comes down, who's only on a breath hold as well, I want to give them feedback. I want to tell them what's working, what's not working, because otherwise they're going to keep making the same mistakes every time, because they can't see what I see, and a lot of the time they don't know what their body's doing under the water. They think they're doing one thing, but their body's probably doing the other. So for me, if I'm shooting anywhere that the model is also on breath hold, I won't use scuba, because I want to be in the same situation as them. And having all that scuba gear on just makes it way harder for me to sort of come up and then have a conversation with them. So the only time I really use scuba is if my model is also on scuba. So I do quite a bit of shoots where we'll be out in the ocean or in deeper water, where we'll have a team of safety divers. One of them will take the model. She'll have a regulator on the diver as well. And so we'll go down to like 60 feet on a shipwreck, and we'll set the model on the front of the ship, and they'll breathe up. We'll take the regulator out so she can keep posing without the regulator, just on breath hold. And then at the end of that, the safety diver comes back in. So for me, the only time I really use scuba is if there's no way we can do this on breath hold.
So usually you're matching the model. That way you can... It's almost reciprocal. So if you both are holding your breath, then you're coming up at the same time, giving feedback, coming down at the same time, et cetera, et cetera. No, that's great.
Yeah. Even kind of to the point where I will, if we're in cold water and the model doesn't have a wetsuit, then I won't wear a wetsuit. I want them to feel like we're on equal ground, and that they're not taking more of a risk than I am. I want them to feel like we're equal. So
that's fantastic. Yeah. What would you say will be a good piece of advice for anyone looking to transition into underwater photography, but maybe hesitant due to some of the challenges we've spoken with right now, or some of the ones that we haven't touched based on?
Yeah. So the thing to know when you get into underwater photography is that it's not just the models who now have to do and deal with a whole bunch of stuff, you do as well. So the main thing that I kind of teach people, and the main thing I kind of recommend, is making sure that you're good under the water. So if you've never been a diver and maybe you're not much of a swimmer, but you want to try underwater, you want to work on your skills first. So you don't want to be under the water, kicking your legs and flailing around, trying to hold your balance and keeping your buoyancy under control whilst holding a camera and trying to take a shot. And also directing someone else. If you've never done it yourself, it's really hard to direct someone else how to do it. So the biggest thing that I kind of say is do a freediving course, do a scuba course, learn about controlling yourself and having stability under the water, and that's going to give you a higher success rate because you are now less concerned about what you're doing, and you can kind of concentrate more on what's happening on the other side of the lens.
Really, really great info there. And I want to circle back now, since you mentioned you are an educator, not just a photographer, cinematographer, but you're also an educator, I'm sure a mentor to some, and you have some upcoming events. I caught you a couple of days before you leave the country, where I started jotting some of these down, but you're going to Croatia for a Mermaid retreat, and I think Hannah Mermaid's joining you.
That's right.
And after that, you're going to Belgium. What is this aquarium that you're shooting at? I was trying to find some information, but I didn't get a chance to look at it. What is this aquarium that you're shooting in Belgium?
Yeah, so in Belgium they have it's an aquarium, but it's more a dive facility. So it's a big tank. It's quite a big aquarium sized tank. And it's full of wildlife, so fish and stuff in there. But they've also got amazing I guess, kind of props and landscapes and stuff in there. So I think they've got like a sunken car. They've got, maybe fake trees and stuff in there. So it's very much a kind of little adventure playground for diving. And you can just go there and you hop in and sort of swim around and stuff. So what I'm doing there is just doing photo shoots with people, in this amazing landscape, using these kind of, I guess, little sort of props and sets that they've built there, so we can sort of play around and shoot some stuff, but still in controlled, warm, heated, beautiful water. Yeah.
Oh my God, heated. I like that one.
Yeah, it's good.
In Croatia, tell me a little bit about that retreat, because I think that's the first one they're having for the Mermaid retreat, or is that correct?
Yeah, I think it's either the first or second year of. It's called Adria because we're in the Adriatic Sea. And what it is basically we're on the island of Vis, which is off the coast of Croatia. It's the furthest island out into the Adriatic Sea. And it's more of it's sort of an eco retreat for mermaids. So, the reason a lot of people are mermaids is because they love the ocean, they love the water. And so what Nia and Barbie, the organizers, have kind of put together is this retreat. I think it's 7 days, and it's a mixture of learning how to sort of be a mermaid with Hannah. So she's teaching you how to pose and move under the water and perform. We're doing photo shoots as well. But on top of that, they're doing learning how to be sort of eco warriors, really. So that, how do we do beach cleanups? How do they look after wildlife? I think they're doing some events where they're getting people to adopt sea turtles, because there's a big problem with sea turtles in the fishing environment out there. And I think we're doing some stuff with the ghost nets as well, which is the old fishing nets that just float around the ocean. So it's a lot of cleanup and a lot of kind of ecological sort of stuff as well.
In what ways do you think that underwater photography can potentially contribute to, I suppose, a broader conversation about the environment and the conservation of it and just the beauty of the ecosystems down there?
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes from highlighting these kind of issues, I think, that we have in the ocean. And one thing that I kind of learned early on was that I used to work at the aquarium here in Long Beach as a volunteer. There's a aquarium at the Pacific, and it's quite a big aquarium. And I was one of the divers who would go in and clean the tank, every day, and we'd feed the fish and all that sort of stuff. And what I kind of noticed was, we'd be floating through these tanks, and there'd be like school kids coming through. And you would just see them, whatever age they are, like, 8, 9, 10 years old. And they would just be bored, sort of looking at these fish. It didn't really mean anything to them. They were just like, oh yeah, cool fish. But it wasn't until we would float in as the divers that you'd see their eyes light up, and they were like, whoa, there's a person in there. And it wasn't until that in my brain I was kind of like, oh, it's not real to them. This could be just a television of, or an animation. They can't see themselves in there. And it wasn't until they saw the people in there that they realized that this was real and that it was tangible and a place that they could visit. And so I think a lot of the photography that was around sort of highlighting a lot of these issues of ocean conservation and all that sort of stuff, they were kind of devoid of people. It was all about the wildlife, or if there was people in there, it was very, lots of gear and equipment on. I think what underwater portrait photography, which is what I do, can bring to this is it puts people in these environments. So we can create concepts and, kind of campaigns that have people in them that let people looking at them sort of envisage themselves there as well and sort of make it tangible. So, even if we're looking at something that's quite artistic, with someone in a big frilly dress, in front of, a sea full of plastic, I think that sort of personal human element in there makes people a little more aware of it, makes it a little bit more personal to them. They can see themselves in this environment.
No, I would agree. It's no longer, as you said earlier, like watching television. It's is
Yeah.
real. It's in front of you. How would you say that working underwater as a photographer has influenced your own personal relationship with water or just nature as a whole?
Oh, I mean, it's kind of, as I say, like water is my entire life. Um, it's the place that I dream of. I work all day in it, and then I go to sleep and I dream about it. So, um, there was this movie in the '80s called The Big Blue, and it was about this freediver who didn't freedive so much because he was a competitor, or he was a freediver because he never wanted to leave the ocean. And that's kind of how I feel. Is that this is a place where I feel so at home, and it feels so comforting to me, um, that it's yeah, I don't know, it's my entire personality at this point. So yeah.
Yeah, for me, my movie that got me into water and ocean, and by the way, not the strongest swimmer. It took me a while to learn how to swim, yet I decided to scuba dive, was the Abyss. I remember
Oh yeah.
seeing that as a young kid, and just the idea of this entire civilization being underwater was just fascinating to me. And I mean, granted, it had its moments of chaos in there, but nonetheless, that was my movie for water, and fascinating movie.
Oh no, totally, that's one of mine as well, I think. Yeah, I don't know I can't remember how old I was when The Abyss came out, but it was that kind of, but also it was that kind of fear of the unknown, but then also realizing that these creatures were trying to help, was kind of like, oh, okay, that's not what I was expecting. It's always, the deep ocean's always made out to be scary and dangerous. Um, but yeah, that film, I think, spoke to me on a molecular level as well. It was very much like, I don't know, that's my kind of, I don't know, Fast and Furious. That's my
Yeah,
kind of film.
yeah,
Yeah.
I would agree. You're also going to New Zealand, the UK, and I think those are more so workshops that you're holding, some intensive workshops, and then you're coming back in September for your 3-day workshop in Long Beach. Can
Yeah.
you give me a sneak peek of what you got planned in New Zealand, UK, and back here in LA?
Yeah, so just a little correction there. So it's not New Zealand, it's Zealand.
Oh,
So
okay.
this is in the Netherlands. This is the original Zealand.
I learned
This
something
is
new, man.
No, totally. Yeah, this is why we do these things. So New Zealand is named after this region in the Netherlands. So so where I'm going to there is just a small place. It's just the facility is called Sub Aquatic Services, I think. And they just happen to have a pool, and a fellow underwater photographer, Rob Arnson, who is from there, reached out when he heard that I was coming to Europe, and he was very gracious to help me set this up. And so I've got a 1-day workshop in Zealand, which is in the Netherlands, and then I have 10 days of hanging out in Europe with my wife, and we travel around and go and see some stuff, and then I'm off to the UK where I'm setting up another 1-day workshop where we do, the morning is classroom, the middle of the day is working with models in the water and learning lighting and how to shoot with people. And then the afternoon is editing and post production. And then the next day after that, I actually do some shoots in that same area, but with my cloud set. So I built this set, which basically has realistic underwater clouds in there. So it's something for people to sort of float around, and it's probably one of my most popular sets that I've built. And I'm kind of quite excited to be able to take it to the UK and be able to set it up and shoot there as well.
Oh, I'm sure they're excited as well to see that, man. Yes, one of the things that blows my mind about your work is your set design and all these different things that you incorporate. Like, take the example, the lanterns, these light bulbs. Like, how do you waterproof this kind of stuff?
Yeah, so that's probably one of the biggest questions I get. So, one of the reasons I love shooting underwater is because it's such a dreamland. It's such an abstract, strange place. And so I like mixing that with real world stuff. So, lanterns and that sort of stuff. And a few years ago, I did a Halloween set where I actually had a television that was lit, so it had light coming out of it. Um, and basically, what I use is waterproof lights. So I use waterproof strobes that are made for this sort of situation. I use lots of little waterproof lights, little flashlights, all that sort of stuff. Um, and it's really just taking everyday items and kind of hiding lights inside them. So I'm kind of obsessed with lanterns. So a lot of my work has a lantern in it. Um, and that's really just trying to find a lantern that's big enough to fit the light inside of, and then kind of use that as the centerpiece for the whole shoot.
That's awesome. Yeah. Also, another thing I like about your work is that you're into practical effects. Not a lot of composite work. A lot of it is what you see is what's there, and that's a hallmark of your work. Can you share a time when maybe you had an unexpected challenge with some of these practical effects, but it turned out to be some sort of creative breakthrough during that shoot?
Yeah, let me think. Yeah, so I did a set many years ago now. It was called my Baroque Room, and so it was basically a room that I built underwater. And it's like, a Baroque room, so it's got like wainscoting on the walls, and it's very white, and a nice Baroque window at the back of it. And all this is practical and sitting on the bottom of my pool. Um, but the problem with doing stuff practically is you end up sort of taking everyday items like a couch or a chair, and you have to make it sink. And this is the hardest part. And a lot of the times I'll get something from Goodwill or an old piece of furniture, and it just won't sink. And I'm just piling more and more weight on it as we go. And I did this set, and in it had a couple of beautiful, sort of Baroque pieces of furniture in there. And I was in the middle of a shoot, and the weights on one of them just let go. And so it just shot to the surface. And I was in the middle of a shoot. And so it was just, we just kind of forgot about it. I was like, oh, I'll get rid of that in post or whatever. But we ended up shooting, and this was with Hannah, and she was doing this sort of Alice in Wonderland style thing. And what it ended up being was, if I took the picture and turned it on its side, it looked like all the furniture had sort of, flown to the top. So this accidental piece of furniture floating around ended up being the real clincher of this actual concept that I hadn't even thought about doing.
I think I saw that picture. I was wondering, I'm like, oh, look, he's got the couch up on top, and it was a happy accident that turned out to be, it was supposed to happen.
And that's kind of what a lot of my work is just happy accidents. So, a lot of the way that I shoot is not so much calculated in terms of, I'm going to shoot from this direction, we're going to go, you're going to be here, and all that sort of stuff. It's more a case of, I'm going to set all this stuff up, and then once we're shooting, I might end up being behind the couch shooting the other way, and that might be the direction that works the best. And the reason that I like shooting practically is because it gives me all of those options. So in real time, I can sort of swim around this set and get different angles and things that I probably wouldn't have even thought of. And that's what I love about underwater, is the chaos of it ends up making more magical moments than I could actually ever plan for.
Yeah, it sounds like you can't be rigid in underwater photography. You have to not go with the mindset of, I'm going to get picture A, B, C. It's more so you're creating the environment where you'll see what comes out of it. Is that probably a good way of putting it, Brent?
Absolutely, yeah. It is just like water is never going to bend to your will. It's always going to win. It's the same with an underwater shoot, because something's going to go wrong. It's really hard to replicate stuff. And this drives commercial creative directors crazy, because they want the storyboard. They want it to look like the thing that they've drawn out or they've mocked up. And it's super hard to really kind of get things on the money. And I think for me and my personality type, I like doing things on the fly. I like kind of just dumping a load of crap in the pool and then just getting in there and seeing what happens. And yeah, usually you come out with some kind of magic.
So you mentioned dumping a bunch of crap in there. I'm sure that through those many shoots, you've had instances where crap shows up in the water. How do you clean the water after you dump all that in there?
I have a very understanding and very patient pool guy, Brian. So he actually he kind of looks after the chemistry of my pool, and I'm quite surprised the amount of stuff that I put in there. So I'm dropping, couches and beds and televisions and all sorts of stuff, to the point where the water can get really murky by the end of the shoot. But honestly, like a day or two of just running the filter and keeping the chemistry good, it's usually back to being crystal clear. But about 2 weeks ago, I rented my pool out to a commercial, and they wanted to do a before and after shoot of a swimming pool, because it was for a swimming pool cleaning sort of product, I think. And so our pool was the before, and they wanted to make it look like it was old and green and all that sort of stuff. So they ended up dumping like green dye and all this sort of stuff in the pool to kind of make it look unlooked after. And I had kind of planned for this, and I had maybe been a little cocky, thinking, my filter's going to be able to clean all this quite easily. I underestimated how much stuff they actually put in the pool.
Wow.
Yeah, it took me a week, and I ended up having to drain half of the water out of it.
That's not cheap in LA, man.
No. And it broke my heart because that's a lot of water I'm wasting. Yeah. So that was probably the worst one I've had so far is not being able to get that clean.
How do you adapt to the different types of bodies of water? So your studio's a pool, but you've done work at springs, oceans, and lakes. Each of them have their own complexities. The further out you go from a pool, the less control you have. So how do you adapt to those?
Yeah, honestly, you just have to be able to adapt, I think. And that's like one of the greatest skills of an underwater photographer, I think, is the ability to kind of roll with the punches and have a plan B and a plan C and a plan D. Because I can go to somewhere like the Florida Springs, which is these beautiful crystal clear bodies of water, and generally I go there and you've got 50, 60, 80 foot of crystal clear visibility, like you can see from one end of this thing to the other. But if you get there and suddenly you've got an algal bloom, or it's rained and now all this crap has walked into the water, you kind of have to be able to pivot and to be able to make something out of it. A lot of it for me is because I am a commercial photographer, this is my business. So generally when I'm shooting, someone has paid me to do this. So I have to make it work. I have to find a way to make it work. And so it is a case of either, if the water is murky, you're going to end up having to get closer. So there's less of that murkiness between you and the subject. So it gets a bit clearer. Different ways of lighting stuff. It can get to the point where you just can't shoot anything. Like it's just not worth it. Luckily, I have had only a few of those times. And it's also a case of knowing what you can do on the day and whether you can save this in post. Can I take this into Photoshop and then kind of save it? And I think it's hard to be an underwater photographer without having decent retouching skills as well, just to sort of fix these kind of things.
No, I completely understand that, especially with the murkiness of water and the being so unpredictable. What's one of the most challenging locations you've ever shot in, and what about it made it so difficult?
The forefront of my mind wants to say like the ocean or something like that, but honestly it was this swimming pool that I went to in New Zealand. I'd kind of worked out with this model and her friend that she had a pool at her parents' house that we could go and use, and so we rocked up, and the problem with a lot of water is that if you stand above it and look in, it looks fairly clear. It doesn't seem bad. It's not until you get in the water where it's like you start to see how bad it actually is. and we were doing this sort of a beauty boudoir sort of photo shoot with these two tattooed models. And once I got in the water, I realized we were basically swimming in milk. It
Ooh.
was so murky. And so these girls are beautifully tattooed from head to toe. I ended up having to really just do headshots with them because I had to get as close as possible, and so that was basically my frame, was just that big. Um, and then there was a lot of post production afterwards. So that was probably the worst in terms of quality and stuff as well.
Um, can you discuss a project or series that you're currently working on that you might be particularly excited about? What you hope to achieve with it?
Yeah, so I mean, it's funny. Like, a lot of what we've spoken about is what I'm doing tomorrow. So, I'm doing a shoot tomorrow just to highlight. Um, it's a kind of a personal project of plastics in the ocean and all that sort of stuff. So it's a shoot where I'm shooting in my studio here in Long Beach. I have a merman coming around, Andy, who's this amazing underwater guy. And I have just spent the afternoon going to recycling depots and buying plastic bottles off the people taking them in to sell them. So it was like
I saw you
creep in the
posting on
car park.
Facebook about that too. So I was like, oh, okay, now I make the
The
connection.
connection, yeah. But I'm standing in in this car park of this recycling place, sort of eyeing up people's plastic and stuff. So I now have a van full of plastic bottles and stuff, and we're basically just going to dump them all in my pool tomorrow, and shoot with them. So, but the other thing that I have is I have been sponsored by Godox, who
Nice.
have given me a whole bunch of their waterproof lights. So they have
Oh,
quite
really?
a range of stuff now. Yeah.
Are they LED continuous lights or strobes?
LED continuous. Yeah. So they have a range of sort of, I think, like 18-inch long LED tube lights. And then I think about 4-inch, like little square lights. And then they have these little cube lights, for sort of a hard light source. And so they've given me a bunch of those to kind of play with. And so tomorrow I'm basically going to dump those and all this plastic and Andy in the pool, and sort of see what we can come up with.
That's awesome, man. I can't wait to see what that ends up looking at the end. So definitely looking forward I'll keep a lookout for that.
Yeah.
How do you see the future of underwater photography evolving, and what role do you hope to play in the future with that?
Yeah, it's interesting. So from when I started about 10 or 11 years ago, um, and I really just talk about the underwater portrait side of things. So there's a whole other world out there of underwater photography, in terms of wildlife and all that sort of stuff. But for me, I have kind of firmly put myself in this genre of portrait photography, which is sort of the more creative side of things. And so when I first started, there was very few people doing this, and there was very little online in terms of how to do it and how to sort of build the equipment. Um, and even now, there's very little equipment that is designed for us as portrait photographers. There's a few companies that are starting to get in there. Our is really good. Um, I work with them a lot in terms of trying to sort of customize what they're doing to the creative side of stuff, in terms of triggering strobes and all that sort of stuff. But 10 years on, like now, there is so many more people getting into this. It's becoming way more affordable. It's becoming way more accessible. Um, and it's something that I love seeing because I want to share this world with people. It's a genre of photography that it's difficult, but it's so rewarding once you get it. And so for me, I see it just becoming way more accessible and way more prevalent. And I think for me, in terms of my role, I do want to share the 10 years I've had so far of solving a lot of these problems, and sort of shortcut it for a lot of people. So between what I do with my workshops and I have a podcast, so I interview other underwater creatives and sort of get their perspective of how they do stuff. And I also have a magazine called Waterproof, which that I like to showcase what people are creating and give people a bit of a platform to be able to show off this work and kind of build up the profile of a lot of this stuff.
No, it's fantastic, especially you mentioning that, you've had this decade of trial and errors and sharing it and giving it back to the community. It's fantastic. Not everybody does that. A lot of people just keep that to themselves, but hearing about you actually putting it out there to help others create art is absolutely fantastic.
Yeah,
I guess,
I mean, for me, it's kind of like there was a younger me that would have held on to this, like this is mine, like you can't have it. This I've created this. But I think once I started to realize that no one creates anything like anyone else, like you can kind of copy someone, but even when you copy them, it's never the same. It's still got your imprint on it. And I think I started to see and like to see how other people would take this information and this knowledge and these techniques and build something different and see what they would come up with.
I agree with you 100%, man. Everybody's brings their own little twist and flavor to art. I guess I'll wrap it up with this question, Brett. What are some of the surprising ways that being an underwater portrait photographer has taught you about yourself or your perspective on life?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it goes back to a lot of, like water being my personality, and I think I'm not much of a star sign or a zodiac guy. I am not a water sign at all. I'm a Gemini, and I think a lot of what I've kind of learnt from doing this stuff is the patience that's required, the calmness that is more helpful than not. I think I've learnt how to meditate a little bit. I'm terrible at meditating. My brain is like a hummingbird. It never stops. So I think when I go under the water, that's when it finally starts to just kind of quieten down. And I think even though the water for me is a place of fear and danger, because of my anxiety around it, it's also a place of nurturing and comfort and wonderment. I have this kind of love, not a love-hate relationship, but it's a troubled relationship with water. And I think what it's given me is the ability it's shown me patience, especially working with other people. It's shown me compassion and it's shown me apathy. Because I can see other people's fear and other people's anxieties, and I can find a way in to kind of mitigate that for them. So I think it's given me a lot of tools and a lot of skills that I should probably be using on myself as well.
That's wonderful. I appreciate you sharing that. Are there any questions that I could have asked you that I didn't think of asking you?
Oh, that's a good one. That's a good question. I'm just trying to think if there's anything. Yeah, I don't know.
How about this? Where can people find you? What are some of the best ways to see what you're up to? Facebook, Instagram, obviously your podcast. I'll put links of everything, but what's the best way to get a hold of you, Brett?
Yeah, I mean, so I have a couple of websites. I have a website, brettstanley.com, which is more my commercial sort of cinematography side of things. And I have underwater-photographer.com, which is my portrait studio stuff. But the bulk of my kind of work, if you want to sort of follow what I'm doing, is on Instagram, which is Brett S Photo. And I do post on Facebook, but I also post a whole lot of other crap like the baking and all that sort of stuff that I'm doing and home renovations. So, so I mean, those sorts of things are the best way to kind of see what's happening. The podcast is less about me and it's more about other people and what they're doing and sort of, introducing them to new audiences. So if you want to learn more about the underwater world in general and what else is out there, then the podcast, which is called the Underwater Podcast, is probably the best way to do that, to sort of get some new people to follow and some new inspirations.
Great. Brett, do you have any questions for me?
How is your underwater going? I know you've started in doing some stuff. How's that working out for you?
I did it a couple of years ago. It was before COVID. Initially, it was with some underwater cosplay, and that was very trial and error. had, just a face mask going underwater, panicking, trying to hold my breath. So I had some amazing images. One of them is my favorite, is back there. And now that I'm scuba certified and whatnot, now I want to try it again, bringing some oxygen down there, but keeping to your point that there is this nice balance of coming up and not just leaving your model hanging. I think that's something that I do want to incorporate. So I'm going to try to find the balance between the two, because I think I'll be able to create that. But I'm looking to get back. You mentioned outtakes. I just got some of the outtake stuff, even the little tether Stanley package. So I'm looking forward to trying that out. Hopefully not flooding my gear. So we'll see. Yeah. We'll see how that goes. But I definitely would like to start doing portraits again, because it's very serene. It's very serene, and it's always a challenge. Always something goes not the way you want it to go. And somehow I like that. I don't know why, but I like the uncertainty of shoots.
No, totally. Is there something for you, because you're an above water shooter, right? So you shoot portraits above water. Is there something that you do above water that you're like, oh, I want to take this under, or I want to try this under the water and see if it works?
I love manipulating light. I'm an off light kind of guy with strobes, and the fact that there's so many variables underwater that can prevent you from getting what you want is trying to control something that's uncontrollable. And I just want to bring some of that down and practice it enough to then start to do some fine arts work and see what kind of weird, I don't know. I have a lot of pop culture in my mind from growing up in the 90s and here, originally from South America, then growing up in the United States. It's just interesting clashes that I want to portray. But
you've got like two whole cultures to kind of draw on.
So first I got to make sure that it works, and then I'll get artistically with it.
I'm kind of jealous, because I do remember that kind of initial experimental phase of kind of like, oh, what if I do this, what if I do that? And I still am kind of in that, but now I have some confidence in stuff. I can rule ideas out straight away. But I kind of miss that sort of wide-eyed, optimism of
you'll challenge yourself again, man. You'll be like your guest in your podcast, Eric, and you'll just bring a film camera underwater and then challenge yourself that way.
Oh yeah, I mean, I don't have the patience for that. So for him, like that, him taking a 4x5 Polaroid camera under the water, That's
kudos, it. Man. That is
absolutely
next level. But no, Brett, this has been great. I really appreciate you taking the time of your day to chat with us, and I can't wait to share some of your work as well. When I put this together, and if I edit it quickly enough, it'll be either right before your next workshop or right in the middle as you're in Europe.
Either way, it's going to be great. I mean, thanks for reaching out and asking me to come on. I love talking about this stuff. I love kind of introducing stuff to people to the underwater world. So any avenue is great.
Perfect. Well, Brett, thank you again, man. Safe travels, and we'll definitely be in touch.
Thank you. Sounds great.
Thank you. Thank you for tuning in to The Outspoken Artist. If you know any artists that may be interested in being part of the show, or if you yourself are an artist, visit outspokenartist.com, send me a message, and we can try to get you on the show. Until then, take care.